Picture this. It's Sunday evening. You've got a list of things you planned to do this weekend. Maybe start that business idea you've been sitting on for 6 months. Write the first chapter of something. Learn a new skill. Apply for that better job. And instead, you spent the day horizontal, scrolling through the achievements of strangers on the internet, thinking, I could do that. I should be doing that. Why am I not doing that? And here's the weird part. You're not lazy because you don't care. You care deeply. You have visions. You have plans. You have entire futures mapped out in your head in perfect cinematic detail. You just can't seem to start. Or if you do start, you stop. And then you feel this specific, crushing kind of guilt that regular lazy people don't feel because they've made peace with not wanting much. But you want everything. You just can't get off the couch. If that resonates with you, I want you to stay with me for the next few minutes, because what's happening inside your brain is actually far more fascinating and far less shameful than you've been told. Let's start by dismantling a myth. The word lazy implies indifference. It implies someone who simply doesn't care, who's perfectly content doing nothing. But the people I'm describing, maybe you, are not indifferent. In fact, they tend to care too much. They have a rich inner world of ambitions, ideas, and desires. The problem isn't a lack of wanting. The problem is a very particular kind of gap between desire and action. And that gap has a name in psychology. It's called the intention-action gap, and researchers have been fascinated by it for decades. Here's the thing your brain is doing that nobody told you about. When you imagine achieving something, writing that book, launching that company, getting fit, your brain lights up with dopamine, the same chemical that gets released when you actually accomplish something. Your brain, in its beautiful and slightly ridiculous way, doesn't fully distinguish between imagining the reward and receiving it. So in a very real neurological sense, the dreaming feels like doing. And once your brain gets that little hit, the urgency to actually move fades. You've already tasted the win. Why go through all that discomfort to get there? This is sometimes called mental simulation as a substitute for action. And a study published in the journal Psychological Science found that people who vividly imagined completing a goal were actually less likely to take steps toward it, not more. The fantasy had already done the emotional work. Your brain filed it under handled. Now pair that with something else going on in the psychology of ambitious people specifically. And this is where it gets really interesting. Ambitious people tend to have unusually high standards. They don't just want to do the thing, they want to do it well. And that's where perfectionism sneaks in through the back door and sits down like it owns the place. Here's how it plays out in real life. You want to start a podcast, but before you start, you need the right microphone, the right format, the right niche, the right name. You research for 3 weeks, you compare equipment on 6 different forums, you draft and redraft an intro that nobody has heard yet, and eventually the whole project starts to feel so enormous, so exposing, so ripe for failure, that the couch becomes the safest place in the world. Doing nothing is, in a perverse way, protecting you from the one thing ambitious people fear more than failure, which is evidence that they might not be as capable as they hoped. Psychologist Carol Dweck, famous for her research on mindset, found that people with a fixed mindset, those who believe ability is innate and unchangeable, are far more likely to avoid challenges, not because they don't care, but because they care so much about their self-image that risking failure feels like risking their entire identity. And ambitious people have a lot riding on their identity. Their self-worth is often tied up in the idea of what they could become. Starting something means it could go wrong, and if it goes wrong, then maybe the dream was always just a dream. So they wait. They wait for the right moment, the right conditions, the right version of themselves that feels ready. And the waiting looks like laziness from the outside, but from the inside, it feels like self-preservation. There's another layer here that I think we don't talk about enough, and it has to do with how ambition itself is experienced. For most people, ambition sounds exciting and energizing, but for a surprising number of high-dreaming, low-starting people, ambition is actually exhausting before anything even begins. Think about what it's like to have a genuinely big dream. You're not just thinking about writing a blog, you're thinking about what it could become, the audience, the book deal, the speaking gigs, the life change. The dream is enormous from the very first moment, and when you sit down to write the first post, you feel the full weight of that enormous dream staring back at you through a blank page. The mismatch between where you are and where you want to be is so vast, it feels almost paralyzing. Psychologists call this the grand vision problem, when the scale of your ambition makes the first step feel laughably insignificant and terrifyingly high stakes at the same time. It's like standing at the base of Everest in flip-flops, thinking, I should probably take a step. The gap is so overwhelming that your brain defaults to inertia, not because you don't want the summit, but because the summit is all you can see. So what does this all add up to? Who is this person really? Because I think this combination, high aspiration, low activation, is more common than we think and more nuanced than the world gives it credit. These are often deeply creative people. They think in possibilities, in futures, in stories. Their imagination is a genuine gift. It's what gives them the vision in the first place. But that same imagination that lets them see the destination in vivid detail also lets them see every possible way things could go wrong, every embarrassment, every critique, every version of the story where it doesn't work out. The brain that dreams big also catastrophizes big. They're also often people with a very high need for meaning. They don't just want to be busy, they want what they do to matter. And that standards bar, that insistence on doing something worth doing, can make ordinary starting feel beneath the vision. Sending out one application feels small. Writing one paragraph feels futile. The gap between the first act and the desired outcome feels too humiliating to bridge. But here's where I want to offer you a reframe, because I think you've spent enough time being hard on yourself about this. The same neurology that makes you lazy is also what makes you imaginative. The perfectionism that stops you from starting is the same force that, once directed well, makes you produce something exceptional. The fact that you want so much, that you feel the gap so intensely, is not a character flaw. It's a sign that you have a sophisticated internal compass for what matters. The issue isn't your ambition. The issue is that no one taught you how to metabolize it, how to break the grand vision down into something your nervous system can actually act on without triggering the threat response. How to decouple your self-worth from the outcome long enough to take imperfect action. How to use the dream as fuel rather than as a measuring stick that makes every early attempt feel like failure. What the research consistently shows is that the bridge between dreaming and doing isn't motivation, it's habit and environment. It's making the first action so small it barely registers as a decision. Writing one sentence, sending one email, working for 15 minutes with your phone in another room. Not because those small acts are the dream, but because they build the neural pathway between imagining and executing. They teach your brain that starting is survivable, and slowly the gap begins to close. The greatest irony of being lazy but ambitious is that the ambition is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, pointing you towards something that matters to you. It's the laziness that has gotten a bad reputation it doesn't entirely deserve. Because in many cases, what we're calling laziness is really exhaustion, fear, perfectionism, or an imagination so vivid it's gotten ahead of the nervous system's ability to act. You are not broken. You are not uniquely flawed. You are someone with a big inner life trying to figure out how to make it visible in the world. And that, honestly, is one of the most human things there is. So tell me, does any of this land for you? Because I'd genuinely love to know where you see yourself in this. Drop it in the comments. And if this kind of deep dive into the human brain is something you want more of, you know what to do.